Time is the one predator we can never escape. It hunts us all equally, transforming youth into memory with ruthless efficiency. At least, that's what we've always believed. In the summer of 1952, the Sullivan sisters, Emma, Charlotte, and Abigail, posed for what should have been an ordinary photograph. They had no way of knowing that this image would become the first piece of an impossible puzzle. This is not a story about photography. This is a story about time, family secrets, and the terrible price of staying young forever. Three sisters took a picture together, but decades later, the middle one still looks 20. Oakwood was like many small coastal towns in Massachusetts, a place where everyone knew everyone, where secrets were currency, and where the Sullivan family had lived for generations. The Sullivan sisters were as different as sisters could be. Emma, the eldest at 22, was practical and responsible, already engaged to her high school sweetheart James Richardson. Emma was the planner, the one who always knew exactly where her life was headed. College, marriage, children, all neatly arranged like items on a grocery list. Her hair was always perfectly styled in a practical bun, her clothes always pressed and proper. Even in summer, she carried a small notebook to write down ideas for her wedding. Charlotte, 20, was the dreamer, artistic, impulsive, and always searching for something beyond the borders of their small town. Her sketchbook was her constant companion, filled with drawings of places she'd never been but desperately wanted to see. Paris, Rome, New York. The names themselves were like magic spells to her. Charlotte's wavy brown hair was often unkempt, her fingernails perpetually stained with paint or charcoal. She'd been accepted to art school in New York City, a fact that filled her with equal parts excitement and terror. And then there was Abigail, 18, the family's sunshine, beloved by everyone who met her. The youngest Sullivan had a gift for making others smile, for finding joy in the smallest moments. Her blonde hair bounced when she laughed, which was often. Unlike her sisters, Abigail had no grand plans for her future. She was content in Oakwood, working at the local library and dating the police chief's son. Her happiness came from being present, not from dreaming of elsewhere or planning for tomorrow. It was Emma's idea to visit Pearson's photography studio that sweltering July afternoon. A proper portrait before her wedding, before Charlotte left for New York, before their lives inevitably diverged. The studio was small but elegant, with heavy velvet curtains and ornate wooden furniture. Mr. Pearson, a thin man with silver-rimmed spectacles, had been photographing Oakwood's residents for over 30 years. He'd captured their parents' wedding, their first communion portraits, and now, the three Sullivan sisters together. If you'll just take your positions, ladies. Emma in the middle, I think. Why does Emma always have to be in the middle? Because I'm the one getting married, Charlotte. This was my idea. Actually, I think Charlotte should be in the middle. She's the artist. She has a better sense of balance. This isn't one of her paintings, Abby. Perhaps the bride on the left, the youngest on the right, and Charlotte in the middle. That would create a nice symmetry. See? Even Mr. Pearson agrees with me. Emma sighed but acquiesced, as she often did when both her sisters aligned against her. The three young women arranged themselves on the burgundy settee, Emma with perfect posture, Charlotte with a hint of a smirk, and Abigail beaming her infectious smile. Just a little closer together, ladies, that's it. This will be a wonderful keepsake. I still don't see why we need a formal portrait. Mother has dozens of pictures of us. Because you're getting married in 2 weeks, Emma. After that, who knows when we'll all be together again. I think it's a wonderful idea. Something to remember this summer by. Hold still now. 1, 2, 3. In that frozen moment, captured on silver halide and paper, the three Sullivan sisters existed in perfect equilibrium. None of them could have imagined how that balance would shatter in the decades to come. The photograph was just the beginning. What happened next would set in motion events that would haunt the Sullivan sisters for the rest of their lives. But to understand how three ordinary young women became entangled in something extraordinary, we need to follow Charlotte Sullivan down a path she was never meant to walk. 3 days after the photograph was taken, Charlotte found herself wandering along Harbor Street, the oldest part of Oakwood. The cobblestone road ran parallel to the waterfront, lined with buildings that had stood since colonial times. Most were now quaint shops catering to the summer tourists, ice cream parlors, souvenir stands, and antique stores. But there was one shop Charlotte had never noticed before. Tucked between a tobacconist and a bookstore was a narrow storefront with a weathered wooden sign that read Winter's Antiquities and Curiosities. The windows were so dusty that she could barely make out the shadowy objects displayed behind the glass, strange brass instruments, taxidermied animals in unnatural poses, and books bound in materials Charlotte couldn't identify. Something about the shop called to her. Perhaps it was simply her artist's curiosity, her perpetual hunger for the unusual. Or perhaps it was something more. Fate, if one believed in such things. Either way, Charlotte Sullivan pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit by gas lamps, giving everything a golden, dreamlike quality. Glass cases lined the walls, filled with artifacts from distant lands and times: Egyptian scarabs, Roman coins, Victorian medical instruments. The air smelled of dust, old paper, and something else Charlotte couldn't quite place. Something vaguely metallic and ancient. Most people walk past my shop a dozen times before they notice it. But you saw it on your first pass, didn't you, Miss Sullivan? Charlotte startled at the voice. From behind a beaded curtain emerged an elderly man, tall and impossibly thin, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her. His silver hair was neatly combed, his three-piece suit immaculate despite the dusty surroundings. How do you know my name? I've never been in here before. I make it my business to know all the residents of Oakwood, particularly those with discerning eyes. You're the artist, aren't you? The middle Sullivan sister. Yes, I'm leaving for New York soon. Art school at the Pratt Institute. New York. A city of infinite possibilities and dangers. Are you excited to leave Oakwood behind? Charlotte wandered deeper into the shop, running her fingers along the spines of leather-bound books. Terrified, actually, but not as terrified as I am of staying. An honest answer. Those are rare these days. He watched as Charlotte examined a case of ancient timepieces, sundials, hourglasses, and pocket watches from various eras. These are beautiful. Do they all work? Time is my specialty, Miss Sullivan. Every item in that case still measures the passing seconds, just as they did centuries ago. My father collects watches. His birthday is next month. Perhaps I could find something for him here. Perhaps. Though I suspect you came here looking for something for yourself, not your father. Charlotte looked up, startled by his insight. What makes you say that? Just an observation. People rarely enter my shop by accident, Miss Sullivan. They come because they're searching for something, even if they don't know exactly what. What are you searching for? I'm not sure. Time, maybe? There never seems to be enough of it. 2 more weeks in this town feels like an eternity. But then there's all of New York to explore, all of life to figure out. The young always want to rush forward, while the old wish desperately to go back. But time moves in only one direction, doesn't it? Of course it does. That's basic physics. Is it? I find physics to be anything but basic, especially when it comes to time. Einstein himself suggested that time is relative, did he not? Something in his tone made Charlotte pause. There was a weight to his words, as if they carried a meaning beyond their surface. I should go. My mother is expecting me for lunch. Of course. But do come back, Miss Sullivan. I believe I might have something of interest to you after all. Charlotte left the strange shop feeling unsettled. Mr. Winters had seemed to know too much about her, had seen too clearly the restlessness that plagued her. She resolved to avoid Harbor Street for the remainder of her time in Oakwood. But resolutions made by 20-year-olds rarely survive the week. 5 days later, with Emma's wedding just a week away, Charlotte found herself once again standing outside Winters' Antiquities and Curiosities. This time, she had a proper excuse. Her father's birthday gift, nothing more. She pushed open the door with more confidence than she felt. The shop was different somehow, more items on display, yet also more spacious. Charlotte wondered if Mr. Winters had rearranged things since her last visit. The prodigal artist returns. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about our little establishment. I've been busy. My sister's wedding is next weekend. Ah yes, Emma's wedding to the Richardson boy. A sensible match. How do you know, James? Oakwood is a small town, Miss Sullivan. News travels quickly, especially news as significant as a union between 2 founding families. Charlotte nodded, though the explanation didn't entirely satisfy her. She moved toward the case of timepieces she'd admired on her previous visit. I'd like to look at watches for my father. Something unique, but not too expensive. I'm on an art student's budget, after all. I think I have just the thing. Instead of opening the display case, Mr. Winters disappeared behind the beaded curtain. Charlotte heard the sound of a key turning in a lock, then silence. When he returned, he was carrying a small wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. This came into my possession only recently, a most unusual timepiece. He placed the box on the counter and opened it with reverence. Nestled inside on a bed of black velvet was a silver pocket watch unlike any Charlotte had ever seen. Its case was intricately engraved with symbols that seemed both ancient and somehow mathematical. But it was when Mr. Winters opened the case that Charlotte gasped. 3 faces? I've never seen anything like it. Nor has anyone else in Oakwood, I'd wager. It was crafted in Spain in the late 16th century by an alchemist named Alvaro de Luna. He was obsessed with the nature of time, convinced that it was not the river most believe it to be, but rather a complex system that could be manipulated under the right conditions. Manipulated? You mean like time travel? Nothing so dramatic. De Luna believed time could be redistributed, slowed in some places, accelerated in others. This watch was his crowning achievement. Charlotte studied the 3 clock faces with growing fascination. Each was exquisitely detailed, with Roman numerals and delicate filigree hands. But as she looked closer, she noticed something odd. They're all showing different times, and this one seems to be running backward. Very observant, the top dial shows conventional time. The lower left shows personal time, the time as experienced by the watch's owner, and the lower right shows what De Luna called borrowed time. Borrowed from whom? That's the fascinating part. According to the alchemist's journals, the watch doesn't create time, it merely redistributes it. For the owner to experience time more slowly, someone else must experience it more quickly. A balance must be maintained. Charlotte laughed, but the sound was hollow even to her own ears. You can't honestly expect me to believe this watch has magical powers. Magic is simply science we don't yet understand, Miss Sullivan. But no, I don't expect you to believe me. The modern mind is trained to be skeptical, as it should be. He closed the watch case with a soft click and returned it to its box. How much is it? For your father? I'm afraid it's not for sale. Then why show it to me? Because you asked to see something unique, and because I thought it might interest you, personally. An artist should be exposed to the extraordinary, don't you think? It expands the imagination. I should go. My mother will be wondering where I am. Of course, but the offer remains open, should you change your mind. What offer? You said it wasn't for sale. Not for your father, no, but for you. Well, that's a different matter entirely. Charlotte left the shop feeling even more unsettled than after her first visit. Winter's talk of time redistribution was absurd, of course, yet something about the watch had spoken to her. Those 3 faces, each telling a different story about time's passage. It was poetic in a way, the kind of thing that might inspire a series of paintings. The week leading up to Emma's wedding passed in a blur of rehearsals, fittings, and family gatherings. Charlotte tried to focus on her sister's happiness, on the festivities, on anything but the strange shop on Harbor Street and its even stranger proprietor. Yet her dreams were filled with ticking clocks and Mr. Winters's piercing blue eyes. The night before the wedding, after the rehearsal dinner, Charlotte found herself unable to sleep. The house was quiet, Emma and Abigail having long since retired to their rooms. Without consciously deciding to do so, Charlotte dressed and slipped out into the warm summer night. Oakwood was different after dark. The tourist crowds were gone, the shops closed, the streets empty save for the occasional cat prowling for mice among the garbage cans. Charlotte's feet carried her toward Harbor Street, toward the one shop she suspected might still have a light burning in its window. She was right. A faint golden glow emanated from Winter's antiquities and curiosities, like a beacon calling her home. The door was unlocked, as if Mr. Winters had been expecting her. The night before your sister's wedding seems an odd time for shopping, Miss Sullivan. I couldn't sleep, and I wanted to ask you more about the watch, the one with 3 faces. Ah, I thought it might haunt you. Objects of power often do. I don't believe in objects of power, Mr. Winters, but I am curious about its mechanism. How does one watch maintain 3 separate timekeeping functions? Mr. Winters smiled, as if Charlotte had passed some sort of test. A perfectly reasonable question. Let me show you. Once again, he disappeared behind the beaded curtain and returned with the mother-of-pearl box. This time, however, he also brought a jeweler's loop, which he offered to Charlotte. See for yourself. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, especially considering it was made over 3 centuries ago. Charlotte placed the loop to her eye and examined the watch's intricate machinery. The gears were impossibly small and precise, made of metals she couldn't identify. Some seemed to shift color as they moved, from gold to silver, to a deep blue that almost glowed. This is impossible. These materials, this precision, this couldn't have been made in the 16th century. It couldn't have been made today. And yet, here it is. How does it work? Theoretically, I mean. The watch doesn't stop time, Miss Sullivan. Nothing can do that. It merely redistributes it, as I explained before. The owner's personal time slows, while someone else's accelerates to maintain balance. And who decides who gets accelerated? The watch chooses based on proximity and connection. Family members are most vulnerable, especially those with whom the owner has complicated relationships. This is insane. You're talking about this thing as if it's alive, as if it makes choices. Not alive, no, but imbued with a certain intelligence, a purpose. And what would happen hypothetically if someone were to use it? Hypothetically, the owner would age more slowly, potentially much more slowly, depending on how often the watch is wound. One complete winding buys approximately 1 year of slowed time. During that year, the owner might age only a month or two, while someone close to them ages at an accelerated rate. And there's no way to control who gets affected? The watch chooses, as I said, based on proximity and connection. That's convenient and impossible to verify. Indeed, science requires repeatability, does it not? Unfortunately, I've only ever owned this one example of DeLuna's work. Charlotte carefully set down the watch, suddenly afraid of it. Not because she believed Mr. Winters's fantastical claims, but because some small, irrational part of her wanted to. How much? If it were for sale, I mean. The watch doesn't require money, Miss Sullivan. It requires commitment, the willingness to accept its nature and its cost, which is, balance will be maintained. That is the immutable law of the universe. What you gain, someone else must lose. This is ridiculous. I'm leaving. Charlotte turned to go, but Mr. Winter's voice stopped her at the door. 3 full turns to activate it. 1 turn each year to maintain it. Remember, Miss Sullivan, balance will be preserved one way or another. Outside, the night air felt thick and oppressive. Charlotte walked quickly, trying to put as much distance as possible between herself and the curiosity shop. The conversation had unsettled her deeply, not because she believed in magical watches, but because for a brief, terrible moment, she had imagined what it would be like to stay young while the world aged around her. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Emma's wedding was perfect, the flowers fresh, the church packed with well-wishers, the bride radiant in her mother's restored gown. Charlotte stood beside her sister at the altar, the dutiful maid of honor, smiling until her face hurt. And if her thoughts occasionally drifted to the strange silver watch and its 3 faces, well, that was only natural. Artists were prone to flights of fancy, after all. 2 days after the wedding, Charlotte was packing for New York when she heard a soft knock at her bedroom door. It was Abigail, her eyes red from crying. I can't believe you're really leaving tomorrow. First Emma moves to James's family home. Now you're off to New York. I'll be all alone. You're hardly alone, Abby. Mother and father are still here, and you have David. Everyone knows you two will be engaged before Christmas. It's not the same. We've always been the 3 Sullivan sisters. Now we're scattered. That's what growing up means, I guess. We can't stay frozen in time forever. The phrase sent an unexpected chill down Charlotte's spine. Frozen in time. Was that what Mr. Winters had been offering? A way to pause while the rest of the world moved forward? Promise you'll write every week and call when you can? I promise. And you'll come visit me in New York for Thanksgiving, right? Mother and father already agreed. Of course. I wouldn't miss it. The sisters embraced, and Charlotte felt a sudden, fierce protectiveness toward her younger sister. Abigail was so open, so trusting. The world would not always be kind to her. That night, Charlotte made one final trip into town, ostensibly to say goodbye to her favorite places. The library where she'd spent countless hours, the ice cream parlor where she'd had her first date, the movie theater where she'd first dreamed of life beyond Oakwood. But her feet carried her inexorably toward Harbor Street, toward the shop with the weathered wooden sign. She told herself she was just saying goodbye, just satisfying her curiosity one last time before leaving for New York. Mr. Winters was waiting, as if he'd known she would come. The mother-of-pearl box sat on the counter, already open, the silver watch gleaming in the lamplight. You've made your decision, then. I haven't decided anything. I wanted to see it one more time. Of course. One last look before you leave for New York, before you begin your new life. Exactly. Tell me, Miss Sullivan, what frightens you most about going to New York? I'm not frightened. No? Not worried about falling behind your classmates, many of whom have had private art tutors since childhood? Not concerned that your talent, so remarkable in Oakwood, might prove merely average in a city of artists? Not afraid that by the time you figure out who you are and what you truly want, it might be too late? Each question was like a needle, pricking the balloon of Charlotte's confidence. How did he know her deepest fears, the ones she hadn't even fully articulated to herself? Even if what you say about the watch is true, and I'm not saying I believe you, the cost seems too high. I would never want to hurt someone else, especially not my family. A noble sentiment, but consider this. The effect is gradual, hardly noticeable at first, and you needn't keep the watch forever, a year or two, just to give yourself a little advantage. Time to find your footing in New York. Time to discover your true potential as an artist. Then you could stop using it and the effect would cease. And whoever was affected would just be, what, a year or two older than they should be? Essentially, yes. A small price to pay for your dreams, wouldn't you agree? Charlotte stared at the watch, its 3 faces reflecting the lamplight. A small price. Just a year or two. Just enough time to establish herself, to find her place in the art world. Then she would stop. She would return the watch to Mr. Winters, or destroy it, or lock it away somewhere. If, and this is purely hypothetical, if I were to take it, how would it work? 3 full turns of the winding key to activate it. After that, 1 turn each year to maintain the effect. Simple. And to stop it? Just as simple. Stop winding it and your natural aging will resume, though the effects already created cannot be undone. Charlotte's hand hovered over the watch. This was madness. She didn't believe in magic or alchemy or time redistribution. And yet, how much? As I said, the watch doesn't require money, only acceptance of its nature. Fine. I accept that you believe it has some special power. I accept that you've told me what you believe to be the truth about it. I don't have to believe it myself, do I? Belief is irrelevant. The watch functions regardless of whether you acknowledge its power. With a decisive motion, Charlotte picked up the watch and slipped it into her pocket. If it doesn't work, I'll bring it back and demand a proper explanation. And if it does work, well, I guess I'll have some thinking to do. Indeed you will, Miss Sullivan. Indeed you will. The train to New York the next morning was crowded with summer tourists returning to the city. Charlotte found a window seat, her small suitcase tucked safely in the overhead rack, her sketchbook open on her lap. The silver watch was in her coat pocket, heavy as a stone. She didn't believe it would work, couldn't believe it. And yet, as the train pulled away from Oakwood Station, as her hometown receded into the distance, Charlotte found her hand straying to her pocket, fingers closing around the cool metal of the watch case. 3 full turns to activate it, Mr. Winters had said. What was the harm in trying? If nothing happened, and surely nothing would, then she had a unique antique watch, a conversation piece for her dormitory room at Pratt. And if something did happen, Charlotte waited until the conductor had taken her ticket and moved on to the next car. Then, carefully, she withdrew the watch from her pocket. Its 3 faces gleamed in the sunlight streaming through the train window. The top dial showed the correct time, 8:47 a.m. The lower left and right dials were motionless, their hands frozen at midnight. With trembling fingers, Charlotte found the small key integrated into the watch's stem. 3 full turns. That's all it would take to prove Mr. Winters was either a madman or a liar. 1 turn. The key moved smoothly, the mechanism inside clicking with precision. The lower dials remained motionless. 2 turns. Still nothing. 3 turns. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, so subtly she might have imagined it, the lower left dial, personal time, Mr. Winters had called it, began to move. Slowly at first, then picking up speed until its hands were rotating counterclockwise at an alarming rate. Simultaneously, the lower right dial, borrowed time, began to move forward, its hands spinning rapidly clockwise. Charlotte almost dropped the watch in shock. This was impossible. There must be some trick, some hidden mechanism that Mr. Winters had activated before giving her the watch, a practical joke at her expense. And yet, as she stared at the 3 dials, Charlotte felt something shift within her, a subtle change, like the loosening of a tightly wound spring. She felt lighter somehow, as if time's constant pressure had eased just slightly. Frightened by the sensation, Charlotte quickly closed the watch case and shoved it deep into her coat pocket. It was just her imagination, surely. The power of suggestion combined with the emotional upheaval of leaving home for the first time. Nothing more. By the time the train pulled into Grand Central Station, Charlotte had almost convinced herself that nothing unusual had happened. The watch was just a watch, peculiar in design, but still bound by the laws of physics like everything else in the world. And if sometimes in the coming days she felt as if she were moving slightly out of sync with those around her, well, that was just the disorientation of being in a new city, wasn't it? Pratt Institute was everything Charlotte had hoped for and feared. Her classmates were talented, intimidatingly so. Her professors were demanding and often brutally honest in their critiques. The city itself was overwhelming, loud, fast, and indifferent to the struggles of one small-town girl trying to find her place in it. But Charlotte adapted more quickly than she'd expected. While her fellow freshmen seemed perpetually exhausted, constantly racing to complete assignments and meet deadlines, Charlotte found she had ample time. She was never rushed, never frantic. Her work improved rapidly, drawing praise from even her harshest critics. "You have an old soul," her life drawing professor told her after reviewing her midterm portfolio. "There's a maturity to your perspective that's unusual in someone so young." Charlotte had smiled and thanked him, all the while feeling the weight of the silver watch in her pocket. She hadn't looked at it since that day on the train, too afraid of what she might see. But she carried it always, irrationally certain that if she left it behind, whatever strange advantage she had gained would vanish. December arrived, bringing with it Charlotte's first trip home since leaving for New York. Thanksgiving had been spent with friends in the city, but Christmas was for family. She boarded the train to Oakwood with mixed emotions, excitement to see her parents and sisters, anxiety about returning to the town she'd been so eager to escape. Her father met her at the station, his familiar Buick idling at the curb. He embraced her warmly, then held her at arm's length, examining her face. "You look exactly the same, Lottie. The city hasn't aged you a bit. Not like your poor old dad." It was just a figure of speech, the kind of thing parents always said to their children. But it sent a chill through Charlotte nonetheless. Did she look the same? She hadn't noticed any changes in herself. But then one rarely noticed the subtle shifts in one's own appearance. The Sullivan family home was decorated for Christmas, a pine tree in the corner of the living room, garlands draped over the mantel, the scent of her mother's gingerbread cookies in the air. It was as if she'd never left, as if the past 4 months had been a dream. And then Emma arrived with James, and Charlotte felt the first real shock of her return. Her older sister looked different, not dramatically so, but noticeably. There were fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there in August. Her hair seemed slightly duller, her movements a touch less fluid. She looked closer to 30 than 23. "Charlotte, look at you, the sophisticated New York artist." They embraced, and Charlotte could feel a new thinness to her sister's frame, a fragility that hadn't been there before. How are you, Em? Tired, to be honest. "Married life is wonderful, but between keeping house for James and helping his mother with the family business, I hardly have a moment to myself. But look at you. You're positively glowing." Charlotte mumbled something about good dormitory food and quickly changed the subject. But throughout dinner, she found herself stealing glances at Emma, cataloging the subtle changes in her sister's appearance and demeanor. Abigail arrived the next day, bubbling with excitement about her new job at the library and her increasingly serious relationship with David. She seemed unchanged, as vibrant and youthful as ever. Charlotte found herself relaxing slightly. Perhaps Emma's accelerated aging was simply due to the stress of her new responsibilities. Nothing more sinister. But that night, alone in her childhood bedroom, Charlotte finally gathered the courage to examine the silver watch again. With trembling hands, she withdrew it from the hidden pocket she'd sewn into her suitcase. The top dial still kept perfect time, but it was the lower dials that drew her horrified attention. The personal time dial had slowed to almost a standstill, while the borrowed time dial spun at twice its normal speed. And on the back of the watch, previously unnoticed, was a tiny engraved name, Emma Sullivan Richardson. The watch had chosen. Just as Mr. Winters had warned, it had selected the family member with whom Charlotte had the most complicated relationship, her older sister, always the responsible one, always the example Charlotte could never quite live up to. Charlotte stifled a sob with her hand. This couldn't be real, and yet the evidence was right in front of her, in the watch's spinning dials, and in Emma's prematurely aging face. She had to get rid of it, had to stop whatever was happening. Charlotte crept downstairs and out the back door into the frigid December night. The ground was frozen solid, but she found a heavy rock in the garden and, with all her strength, smashed it down onto the watch. The glass shattered, but the mechanism inside continued to tick. The 3 dials, visible now through the broken crystal, continued their relentless movement. Personal time nearly stopped. Borrowed time racing ahead, and Emma's name still etched on the back, a condemnation. In desperation, Charlotte ran to the end of the garden where a small stream marked the property line. She flung the damaged watch as far as she could, hearing a satisfying splash as it hit the water. There, it was done. Whatever connection had been established would surely be broken now. She returned to the house, careful not to wake anyone, and crawled back into her childhood bed. Sleep eluded her, but somewhere near dawn, exhaustion finally pulled her under. Charlotte woke to the sensation of something cold and heavy against her chest. With a scream that died in her throat, she realized the silver watch was there, nestled against her skin. Somehow it had returned, and more impossibly, it was fully restored. The crystal intact, the mechanism ticking smoothly. The message was clear. The watch could not be destroyed or discarded. Whatever bargain she had unwittingly struck with it was not so easily broken. The remainder of Charlotte's holiday in Oakwood passed in a haze of guilt and fear. She avoided being alone with Emma, unable to bear the thought that she was somehow stealing her sister's time, her youth, her very life. When it was time to return to New York, Charlotte felt not sadness but relief. Distance, she reasoned, might weaken the watch's effect, but deep down, she knew it was a false hope. Mr. Winters had said nothing about distance limiting the watch's power. Balance would be maintained one way or another. For the next 4 years, Charlotte's rise in the New York art world was meteoric. Her paintings, moody, introspective works that often featured distorted timepieces and elongated human figures, drew critical acclaim and increasingly high prices. By her senior year at Pratt, she had been featured in 2 major galleries and was being courted by several prominent art dealers. And through it all, the silver watch remained her constant companion. She had stopped trying to destroy it after her 3rd attempt resulted in a jagged scar across her wrist. The watch, it seemed, could protect itself. Instead, she kept it locked in a small wooden box in her studio, taking it out only once a year to wind it, as Mr. Winters had instructed. Each Christmas brought fresh evidence of the watch's terrible power. Emma aged rapidly, looking 50 by the time she was 30. Her health began to deteriorate. Arthritis in her hands, vision problems, unexplained fatigue. Doctors were baffled by her condition, diagnosing it as an unusual form of progeria, a rare genetic disorder that causes accelerated aging. Charlotte watched her sister's decline with growing horror and guilt. She told herself repeatedly that she would stop winding the watch, would accept whatever consequences came from breaking its power. But each time the anniversary of her departure from Oakwood approached, she found herself unlocking the wooden box, removing the silver timepiece, and giving the key a single decisive turn. Just one more year, she would think. One more year to establish myself completely. One more year to build my reputation. One more year to save enough money for true security. There was always a reason, always a justification, until the summer of 1977, when a letter arrived that changed everything. Charlotte was 35 now, though she looked barely 25. Her loft in Soho was filled with evidence of her success. Expensive furniture, original artwork by contemporaries she admired, shelves lined with catalogs from her exhibitions. The envelope that arrived that day was out of place among the gallery invitations and business correspondence. Plain white paper, handwritten address, Oakwood postmark. Inside was a brief note from Abigail. Charlie, Emma is dying. The doctors give her 6 months at most. Whatever differences you two have had, whatever has kept you away all these years, please set it aside. She's asking for you. We both need you. Meet us at the Riverside Cafe in Boston on July 15th at 2 p.m. Please, Charlie. It's time to come home. Love, Abby. Charlotte read the note 3 times, her hand shaking so badly that the paper rattled. Emma was dying. At 47, her sister was dying of old age, and it was Charlotte's fault. 25 years. 25 years since she'd boarded that train to New York, since she'd turned the watch key 3 times and set this terrible mechanism in motion. She had told herself it would be temporary, a year or 2 at most. But the temporary had become permanent, the unthinkable had become routine, and now her sister was paying the ultimate price for Charlotte's ambition. Charlotte knew she should destroy the watch, stop its insidious effect. But it was too late for Emma. The damage was done, Mr. Winters had said. The years taken could not be returned. The only thing Charlotte could do now was face her sisters, confess her terrible secret, and beg for a forgiveness she didn't deserve. The Riverside Cafe in Boston was neutral ground. Not Oakwood, with its painful memories and whispered gossip, but not New York either, which Emma had never visited despite Charlotte's periodic invitations. It was a small, elegant establishment overlooking the Charles River, the kind of place where difficult conversations could be had in relative privacy. Charlotte arrived early, selecting a table by the window where she could watch for her sister's arrival. She had dressed carefully that morning, choosing clothes that aged her slightly. A conservative suit, minimal makeup, her hair pulled back in a severe style. Still, the face that looked back at her from the cafe's window reflection was undeniably youthful, the skin smooth, the eyes clear and bright, the face of a woman in her mid-20s, not her mid-30s. She saw them before they saw her. Two women walking slowly along the riverfront path, one tall and slender, moving with the careful deliberation of someone much older than her 43 years. The other hunched and frail, leaning heavily on a cane, her once dark hair now completely white. Charlotte's heart clenched. Abigail and Emma. Her little sister now looked a decade older than her actual age, while Emma looked ancient, a woman in her late 70s rather than her late 40s. Had the watch's effect spread to Abigail as well? Charlotte hadn't considered that possibility, had assumed Emma alone would bear the cost of her unnatural youth, but perhaps the balance required more as time passed. Perhaps it grew hungrier with each winding. The cafe door opened and Charlotte stood, her legs unsteady beneath her. Abigail entered first, scanning the room until her eyes locked with Charlotte's. There was a moment of shock, quickly masked, as Abigail took in her middle sister's appearance. And then Emma shuffled in, her movements painful to watch. She looked up, her eyes, still recognizably Emma's eyes, though surrounded by deep wrinkles, widening in disbelief. Charlotte, 25 years had passed, but Charlotte looked exactly as she had the day she left for New York. Not a line on her face, not a strand of gray in her hair, identical to the young woman in the photograph taken so long ago. Oh my God. Hello, sisters. It's been a while. She gestured to the empty chairs at her table, trying to maintain a composure she didn't feel. Emma moved slowly, easing herself into the seat with a barely suppressed groan of pain. Abigail sat beside her, her eyes never leaving Charlotte's face. I imagine you have questions. Questions? Charlotte, you look exactly the same. How is that possible? That's why I needed to see you both. I can't keep running away from this. From you. I need to explain what happened to me, what I did. And so, in that quiet Boston cafe, Charlotte Sullivan told her sisters the truth about Mr. Winters and his curious shop, about the silver watch with 3 faces, about the bargain she had struck so carelessly, and the terrible price Emma had paid for her sister's unnatural youth. I told myself it wasn't real, that it was just a beautiful antique watch. I wound it 3 times that night in my dormitory room, and then I put it away. I almost forgot about it. Charlotte, do you realize how insane this sounds? Let her finish, Em. A year passed. I was doing well in school. When I came home for Christmas, everyone commented on how good I looked, how New York agreed with me. But then I noticed something. What? You had aged, Em. Not normally. It was subtle, but you looked closer to 30 than 23. And Abby? What about me? You seemed fine. Just normal. That's when I remembered what Mr. Winters said about proximity and connection. Emma, you and I, we've always had a complicated relationship. Always competing, always at odds. That's not true. It is, and you know it. The watch chose you, Em. I was horrified when I realized it. I went back to Oakwood the next day to return it, but the shop was gone. Just an empty storefront where it had been. She told them about her desperate search for Mr. Winters and a way to undo what she had started. About her failed attempts to destroy the watch and the scar it had left when she tried. About the years of guilt and rationalization that had followed. I tried to get rid of the watch. I threw it into the Hudson River. 2 days later, I found it in my coat pocket. I buried it in Central Park. It showed up in my dresser drawer. I even tried to destroy it with a hammer. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing the thin scar across her wrist. That's when I learned the watch protects itself. Oh, Charlie. Eventually, I just stopped winding it. For 5 years, I let it sit untouched. I started aging again, just a little. And I thought maybe the effect on you had stopped too, Emma. Clearly it didn't. 7 years ago, I received a letter from Mr. Winters. No return address, no explanation of where he'd been. Just instructions to meet him at the old lighthouse on the edge of Oakwood. She described the meeting at the abandoned lighthouse. Mr. Winters appearing unchanged despite the passage of 15 years. His revelation that the watch could be transferred to another willing bearer. The terrible choice he had offered her. That's why I had to see you both, to explain, to ask for forgiveness, and to see if one of us would take the watch instead. Mr. Winters said it had to be family, someone with a blood connection. You want one of us to carry this curse for you? I've tried everything else. I've searched for other collectors, experts in the occult, even scientists. No one believes me until I show them proof, and by then they want to study the watch, not help me get rid of it. I think I've heard enough. Emma stood up, her movements slow and painful. Charlotte reached for her hand, desperate to make her understand. Emma, please, look at yourself. You're 47, but you look 70. If this continues what? I'll die? We all die, Charlotte. Some of us just accept that reality instead of making deals with strange men in curiosity shops. Emma pulled away and shuffled toward the door, leaving her sisters behind. Charlotte collapsed back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. She had known this would happen, had known Emma would never forgive her. Why would she? Charlotte had stolen her youth, her health, decades of her life. After a long silence, Abigail spoke. Show me the watch. Charlotte hesitantly reached into her purse and removed a small velvet pouch. From it, she withdrew the silver watch with 3 faces. Don't touch it unless you're certain, Abby. Once it recognizes you, there's no going back. And if I took it, Emma would be safe. The effect would stop for her. But then it would start for me. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was young and stupid and afraid. We were all young, Charlie, but only one of us tried to cheat time. That evening, Emma sat alone in her small house on the outskirts of Oakwood. James had died 3 years earlier, a sudden heart attack at 45, leaving Emma a widow far sooner than anyone had expected. Their 2 children were grown, with families of their own in distant cities. They visited rarely, uncomfortable with their mother's inexplicable aging, her body betraying her decades before it should have. She was surrounded by photographs, her wedding day, her children's births, family vacations, holidays, and there, in the oldest album, the photograph taken that summer day in 1952, 3 young women, arms linked, smiling at the camera. Emma, Charlotte, and Abigail. Sisters. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. Emma moved slowly to answer it, already knowing who she would find on the other side. Abby? I thought you'd be on your way back to New York by now. We need to talk about Charlotte. There's nothing to talk about. Our sister has clearly lost her mind. Then how do you explain this? Abigail took out a small photo album and opened it to show a series of photographs of the 3 sisters taken over the years. Look at these, Em. Really look. This is us in 52, at your wedding in 53, Christmas 56, my college graduation in 60. So? Charlotte doesn't change. Not a wrinkle, not a gray hair, nothing. And you aged decades in the same span. Some people just age differently. Not like this, Emma. You know it's not natural. Emma sat down heavily, finally allowing herself to consider the impossible. If what she says is true, if this watch is really stealing my time, then we need to decide what to do about it. Meanwhile, in a small hotel room in Boston, Charlotte sat on the bed, staring at the silver watch in her hands. 25 years trapped in amber while the world moved on without her. 25 years of running from the truth, of pretending that her success as an artist justified the terrible cost. 25 years of watching her sister wither away, knowing it was her fault. A knock at the door startled her. Charlotte quickly tucked the watch into her pocket before answering. To her surprise, both her sisters stood in the hallway. You came back. We have questions. For the next hour, Charlotte answered every question her sisters had about the watch, its effects, and what she had learned about it over the decades. She was honest now, completely honest, holding nothing back. It was the least she could do. So there's no way to destroy it? Not that I've found. It always returns, always intact, and no way to stop its effects without transferring it to someone else? No. Believe me, I've tried everything. What if we shared it? What? What if we took turns? Each of us keeps it for a few years, then passes it to the next sister. That way, no one bears the full burden alone. Would that work? Mr. Winters never mentioned anything like that. But, maybe? The watch requires balance, but perhaps it doesn't care how that balance is achieved. It's worth trying. Better than one of us suffering while another stays eternally young. After what I've done to you, Emma, you'd still help me? You're my sister, Charlie. Always have been. Always will be. That night, the Sullivan sisters made a pact. Each would keep the watch for 5 years, then pass it to the next sister. A burden divided by 3. For nearly 3 decades, their system worked. The watch passed from Charlotte to Abigail to Emma and back again. None aged normally, but none suffered disproportionately either. They developed a routine, 5 years of accelerated aging, followed by 10 years of normal aging, keeping them roughly in sync with their chronological ages. Charlotte never returned to New York permanently. Her career continued, but at a more measured pace. She divided her time between her studio in Massachusetts and periodic trips to galleries and exhibitions. The Sullivan sisters bought a large house on the outskirts of Oakwood, far enough from town to avoid gossip, but close enough to maintain connections. They lived quietly, their unusual arrangement a closely guarded secret. If neighbors noticed that the Sullivan sisters seemed to age in strange, uneven patterns, they were too polite to mention it. In a world increasingly obsessed with youth and beauty, many women their age showed signs of cosmetic intervention. The sisters were simply assumed to be vain, not victims of a supernatural timepiece. By 2004, the sisters were in their 70s chronologically, though their physical appearances varied widely depending on who currently possessed the watch. They had long since stopped questioning its power or seeking ways to destroy it. The watch was simply part of their lives now. Like an inherited disease they had learned to manage. It was during one of their regular transitions, the ritual of passing the watch from one sister to the next, that Abigail first suggested stopping altogether. It's becoming harder each time. The transitions are rougher. What do you mean? When I give up the watch after my 5 years, the aging hits all at once, like my body is trying to catch up to where it should be. I've noticed that too, and the periods of not aging feel strange now. Like I'm frozen while the world keeps changing around me. I'm sorry. This is still my fault. We agreed, Charlotte. We're in this together now. I've been thinking, what if there was another way? What do you mean? Mr. Winters said the watch maintains balance. What if we stop trying to cheat it? You mean stop using it altogether? We've had extra time, all of us. Maybe it's time to let go. Age naturally for whatever time we have left. But we don't know what would happen. If we just stopped winding it completely, we'd grow old, Charlie, like everyone does. Is that really so terrible? I've been 20 for so long. I don't know if I remember how to change anymore. We'll help you. The decision wasn't easy, but in the end, they agreed. The watch would be locked away, unwound, unused. They placed it in a small metal box, which Emma then locked and hid in the attic of their shared home. Together in time, from now on. Whatever happens. For 5 years, the Sullivan sisters lived as they had always meant to, growing older together, sharing the experiences that time brings to all humans. Charlotte, who had carried the watch longest, aged most rapidly, her body finally catching up to its true 70-something state. Gray hair, wrinkles, aching joints. She embraced these changes as badges of honor, signs that she was finally living honestly. They were happy, genuinely happy. Perhaps for the first time since that summer day in 1952, when they had posed for a photograph, arms linked, unaware of the strange journey that awaited them. And then, in the 6th year of their freedom from the watch, Abigail fell ill. It began with fatigue, then rapid weight loss, then a cascade of symptoms that baffled her doctors. Tests were run, specialists consulted, experimental treatments attempted. Nothing helped. Abigail Sullivan was aging at an accelerated rate. Not gradually, but catastrophically, as if decades of cellular deterioration were happening in months. By the time she was admitted to Massachusetts General Hospital, Abigail, chronologically 74, had the body of a woman well over 90. The rate of cellular deterioration is unlike anything I've seen. It's as if her body is aging at an accelerated rate. How long does she have? Days, maybe a week. In Abigail's hospital room, the 3 sisters faced the terrible truth they had tried to escape. It's the watch. It's claiming its balance. That's not possible. We stopped using it years ago. The time we borrowed is being reclaimed, all at once. Then I'll start using it again. Take back the burden. No. Promise me you won't, Charlie. Promise me you'll leave it locked away. I can't just let you die. We all die, remember? Some of us just accept that reality. Abigail Sullivan passed away 3 days later, her sisters at her bedside. The official cause of death was listed as multiple organ failure due to advanced age, a clinical way of saying that her body had simply worn out. But Charlotte and Emma knew the truth. The watch was reclaiming its balance. collecting the time they had borrowed over so many decades. And Abigail was only the first. 6 months later, Emma followed, her body simply giving out, as if every borrowed year demanded repayment with interest. Like Abigail, she extracted a promise from Charlotte not to use the watch again, not to restart the terrible cycle. And so Charlotte Sullivan found herself alone, the last of the 3 sisters. She had finally gotten what she'd asked for all those years ago, time. But time spent alone was not the gift she had imagined. For weeks after Emma's funeral, Charlotte resisted the urge to retrieve the watch from its hiding place in the attic. Without her sisters to share the burden, using it would mean choosing someone else to suffer in her place, perhaps one of Emma's children, or Abigail's nieces and nephews. She could not do that to them, could not extend the curse to a new generation. You've taken them both. What more do you want from me? The watch sat silently in its metal box, its 3 faces motionless. But Charlotte could feel its pull, its hunger. It wasn't finished with her yet. The temptation remained. One turn of the key, and she could have decades more. Time to start over, perhaps. Time to find meaning in a world without her sisters. There were still paintings she wanted to create, places she hadn't visited, experiences she hadn't had. But each time she found herself climbing the attic stairs, Charlotte would stop and remember her sisters' faces. Emma, aged beyond her years, yet still finding the compassion to forgive. Abigail, dying before her time, yet accepting her fate with grace. No more borrowed time. Charlotte Sullivan had learned the hardest lesson of all, that time's true value lies not in its quantity, but in how it is spent, and with whom. She lived 15 more years, aging naturally, her body finally reflecting the decades she had actually experienced. Her art changed, becoming more reflective, more accepting of life's impermanence. Critics noted a new depth to her work, a wisdom that her earlier paintings, for all their technical brilliance, had lacked. By 2022, Charlotte Sullivan was 90 years old, her body frail, but her mind still sharp. She had outlived her sisters by more than a decade, a fact that filled her with both gratitude and guilt. She had moved into a care facility near Oakwood, her large house too much for her to maintain alone. It was there, on a crisp autumn afternoon, that she received an unexpected visitor. "Your niece is here to see you, Ms. Sullivan." A woman in her 40s entered, Emma's granddaughter, Catherine. She had Emma's eyes and practical manner, but her smile was pure Abigail. "Hi, Aunt Charlotte. How are you feeling today?" "Catherine, you look more like your grandmother every time I see you. I brought something I thought you might want to see." Catherine took out a small velvet pouch. Charlotte's heart stopped. "Where did you get that?" "It was in a box of things Mom left when she passed. I found it last week while cleaning out the attic. It's a beautiful antique watch." She removed the silver watch with 3 faces. It looked exactly as it had 70 years ago, when Mr. Winters first showed it to a young artist dreaming of New York. "You don't know what this is." "It's strange. It has 3 faces and none of them match." "Is it broken?" "In a manner of speaking." "Catherine, I need to tell you a story. A story about 3 sisters who took a picture together long ago." Charlotte studied the watch, its 3 faces gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. The top dial showing conventional time, the lower left showing personal time, frozen at the moment she had last wound it so many years ago, and the lower right showing borrowed time, waiting, patient and hungry. Time doesn't always move in the direction we expect. Sometimes it bends, sometimes it breaks, and sometimes it waits. The photograph of the Sullivan sisters still exists. In it, 3 young women smile at the camera, unaware of the strange journey that awaits them. If you look closely at the middle sister, Charlotte, there's something in her eyes, a knowledge beyond her 20 years, as if she's already seen the price of trying to stand still while time moves forward. They say time is the fire in which we burn, but some fires burn hotter than others. Some consume everything in their path, and some, very rarely, can be temporarily contained, but never extinguished. The curious thing about time is that it always finds its balance. Always.